a writer over at Game Informer, and I want to do this quick video because it's something that's being talked about a lot. It's been talked about for years, but it's been brought up again today. And I wanted to talk about women in gaming and the gaming space. And there's some things that are being talked about currently that I don't agree with. For backstory, and I say this in every video, I have been in this gaming industry this year, makes 18 years. I have experienced the best highs and the lowest lows. And this is something that I've experienced quite a bit myself. And so I don't want to talk about other people's experiences too much because that's one, it's not my story to tell. And two, it's just not my place. I don't want to speak in a place of authority from something I don't have a place of authority in. But right now there's a big conversation happening of rage baiting, which I do agree, as websites become more and more reliant on revenue driven revenue, which is, of course, can't happen if there's no traffic. There is a very weird fine line going on right now of content and the quality of content. I have actually left websites that because they were reliant a little bit too much on clickbait, and it was not, as a writer, I was not comfortable with that. That being said, and a lot of times there is that hate clicks are a thing. Hate clicks are profitable. Hate clicks are very high traffic driven. However, there's a misconception that it's profitable for the writer. That's not the case. Most writers, if they're in a salary position, that's not going to affect anything at all. And if it's freelance position, there's a scale of pay sometimes at most places, or not most places, at some places where if it's got higher traffic there, it would pay bump a little bit. One, that pay bump is usually very minuscule. Two, that's not a standard. A lot of times it's just a standard rate of we'll pay you this amount of money for this many words, we need it by this deadline. So that's kind of, there's a misconception there about rage baiting and who does this benefit. That being said, there's also a misconception that, there's a lot of articles over the years, but more recently this past year, of women journalists coming out talking about their experiences of what's going on, what experiences they've had. And it's a lot of it is being accused as rage baiting. Here's why that's not true. And I'm saying this video, let me preface this, I'm saying this video not to attack anybody, because I'm not talking about a person, I'm not talking about one journalist, I'm not talking about one YouTuber, I'm not talking about any, but this is something that is a very much ongoing and prevalent and widespread issue. But I wanted to say some things to clarify why some of those misconceptions are problematic. But there was a big reason why people are talking out more. I know there was one writer in particular that wrote about toxicity in gaming, and a lot of people automatically took, because of verbiage of saying men instead of all men, the all men is implied. It's the same thing with, all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter talk, or any conversation about people of color. There's this misconception of, or people saying all women, of, oh my God, the jokes of like, oh, women can't do this, da da da, or oh, women are bitchy. And do I agree with those kind of jokes? Absolutely not. But they're not also saying all women. Just like when people, women are speaking up about men, they're not saying all men. Any shred of common sense shows that they're not talking about all men. They're talking about some men. But the thing that they're talking about, that they're bringing men in question, is because when we're having this conversation, it's a call to all men that if this is not behavior that you're exhibiting, this is behavior you should be aware of, so you could also call it out. So that is why at a lot of times that men is being encompassed, just like gamers is being encompassed and people are being encompassed. It's meant to be just a blast for visibility. And, a lot of the ones recently that have been coming out about the toxicity in gaming is to raise awareness, to not only raise awareness to the community as a whole, is, hey, if you participate in this kind of behavior, stop. Like, you are doing a lot more harm than you realize. Because I feel like a lot of people, and myself included, I've said things in the past that I didn't realize had a bigger impact than it did. Sometimes our intention gets lost a little bit. That's definitely something that happens. Work is going off, sorry. But there is a disconnect where if a person comes out and talks about toxicity in gaming, about their, especially when they're drawing from their own personal experience, where it spawns this entire wave of reaction that is all that's doing is proving the point. When you come at a person of F you for saying this, fuck you, you deserve it, da, da, da. You're doing that toxicity that they're talking about. And there are a lot of content creators that like to weigh in with this, and they're talking about rage baiting, or they're talking about toxicity, or they're feeling attacked. And like, let me say, your feelings are valid. Like everybody, your world is your perception. So if your perception is a certain way, then those feelings are very valid. However, as people, our job as people, as functioning members of society, is to constantly be reflective of our own behaviors. I have unlearned a lot of toxic behaviors. For me, I am a very private person, and I am very introverted, and I'm very easily, after I got out of the military, I used to always be like the chill, like, yeah, man, whatever, smoked a lot of pot in high school. When I got out of the military, it really messed me up in a lot of ways where I didn't realize how reactionary I became. And I say reactionary, if not like you say something, I'm going to lash out. I'm saying like reactionary to myself. Like when I start to get overwhelmed, I shut down. I don't read text messages. I don't answer phone calls. I don't read DMs. Right now in my DMs, I probably have close to 300 unread DMs. Is it because I don't want to talk to you? Absolutely not. I just get like a sense of panic, and I need a couple of days to decompress and to kind of get that under control, because it is not your fault that I'm having that anxiety, but you are still being impacted by that. And that's with every aspect of our lives. And I think a lot of times, a lot of these this reactionary content that comes out of pieces like that is a way to express their frustration. They also, you're talking about rage baiting. When you're making content surrounding that and you're claiming that's rage bait, but then you are making content about why this angers you, you are now a part of that rage bait machine. And it's this endless cycle of a person makes a piece of content, another person makes an antithesis piece of content. Both contents are very passionately driven, but the people that aren't involved in that content is what really makes it spiral out of control. You have people that are not involved with content A and people that are not involved with content B, and you're having those people then like attack each other and then attack the people that are creating these specific kinds of content. And it just becomes this vicious cycle that doesn't have an end, because it thrives off the continuation. That disclaimer out of the way, I want to talk about women's experiences in gaming, because it is an issue that is constantly undermined. It is demeaned. It is automatically blanketed as untrue or toxic or counterproductive. And it bothers me. It bothers me because I've had my own instances. I've had my instances where I would go to a press event and I would be the only woman there, which is okay. Not, sometimes there are games that, it has a higher demographic of males, and vice versa. You have other games that have a higher different, demographic of women gamers or facing gamers that like that kind of more. But there would be times where I would be at press events, and I actually there was one AAA event where I literally, the the developer that I was interviewing looked me in the eye and said, "Oh, you must be the token female." I've had colleagues tell me I was just a quota hire despite doing this for as long as I have. I even wrote when I was on deployment. I was working 15 to 18-hour days, 7 days a week, because when you're on a ship on deployment, there are no days off if you're an engineer. You don't get them. And I was on a carrier too, which means there's not a lot of ports that could house a carrier size of our, a boat of our size. So we would go like 90 to 120 days without port. So that's 7 days a week for that long of a period of time, with a shift no lesser than 15 hours. So there's, even with those restrictions, I was still writing. That's how dedicated I am to this industry. This is an industry that I love with everything I have. This is an industry I'm completely passionate about. And this is also an industry that I love the people in it. But the amount of times that a male coworker would see a comment I would get, or see a thread I would get, or see some of the content sent my way and be just shocked is a little shocking in itself, because we're not exactly being quiet about the fact that these things happen. So it's either you're not looking at what we're listening to what we're saying, or you don't care until it affects you. And let me also put a disclaimer here. The people at Game Informer are incredible. I mean, they are incredible. I have never seen a more supportive group of people in any aspect, not just the topic we're talking about now, but in any aspect. So please know that I'm not talking about anybody I'm working with. I'm just saying, like, sometimes my coworkers are shocked to hear what was being said. But I remember when I was working at a previous website, there was actually a big forum thread about me, because one person read an article that they just read the headline. They didn't even bother to read. And it was something stupid, like a Fortnite petition demands this game to be taken down. And it was a joke petition. And I said that in the article. I was like, if you don't like a game, just don't freaking play it. Like, if Fortnite's not your thing, that's totes cool. Like, whatever, I get it. I've tried to get into it many a times. It's not my thing, but that's okay. As long as you're enjoying it, that's all that matters. But I wrote, and in the article, I even said, like, don't sign, if you want to sign the petition, whatever, but don't try to get a game canceled just because it's not your thing. It's very silly. Well, the person read the title and didn't read the article and went to this forum and immediately was like, oh, another SJW trying to cancel another game because her boyfriend doesn't play it, or boyfriend plays it more than he plays her, or something really weird, very, very inherently sexist. One, at the time I was single. Two, I play more shooters than anybody in my circle. My husband can attest that I'm always playing shooters. It's, other than RPGs, is probably my favorite genre. But it was just ridiculous because no part in the article was I saying, this is a good idea, let's cancel this game. In fact, I went beyond to ensure that that's not the message I was sending. But of course, people don't read articles. They read headlines or they read captions. And the forum post just spiraled. It was getting hundreds of comments. This was years ago. I went to moderators, like, can we please take this down? I'm getting a lot of harassment. I'm getting harassment in the hundreds and the thousands. Can we take this down? They said no. So then these people were then sending me social media pictures of it was a group of people, and I've said this before, I've talked about this before, but it was a group of people that were talking about that article in question, in that forum in question, and they were taking images of like decapitated women, mutilated women, women with like their uteruses cut out, all dead women, and all women with my face photoshopped on them. And they were sending me these images telling me, this is what we're going to do to you. Scary, but teethless at that point, because you're not going to do anything. You can't do anything. And I also know how to defend myself. We have guns at our house. I'm also farm military. I know how to defend myself. It wasn't until one of those said people managed to get my address and publicly blasted online where it became an issue. I went to my boss at the time, terrified. And I also went to the moderators again, like, they're actually now blasting my address. This is a safety issue at this time. At that point, the whole entire post was taken down because it then became less of, oh, your feelings are hurt versus, okay, your life could potentially be in danger, because you don't know. There are some weird people, scary people out there with the intent to harm. That is why murder exists. That is why we have serial killers. Like, to ignore that facet of danger is willfully ignorant. And I remember I was trying not to talk about it a lot because as a woman too, we have this stigma that we're overly emotional or we're not rational. That's a huge gendered stereotype. Just like men aren't allowed to show any vulnerability because of society. Like, if a man shows any vulnerability, he's a pussy. Women aren't allowed to show too much. It's a weird constrictive that neither side really benefits from. So I try not to talk about it a lot. But it came up once. It came up once because people were commenting on the articles I was writing in these really negative forums. And when I brought it up to colleagues, they were told, just toughen up, don't worry about it. But these are the same people that are so angry over things that don't even concern them. And it's just like, these are actual issues that go on. I mean, I have closed my DMs more times than I can count because of the level of hate and vitriol that people have, and overwork. And I've shared a lot of my opinion pieces. I stay away from writing about a woman's experience in this industry not because I feel like it's not important, but honestly, I'm too exhausted to deal with the backlash of that. So I really commend women that are able to put that aside and speak, because the misconception is that it is an attack. Like, these articles are a written attack to call to arms against men. And that's not the case. And that's the problem, is people automatically assume whatever is being said is about them. Stop making these stories about you. They're not, unless you are named, these stories are not about you. But when you go on the attack with stories like this, it does make you look guilty of similar behavior because you're taking it as a personal attack. And usually people don't take personal attacks to that level unless they are guilty in some form. But with this articles in question in the last, like, I would say last year and a half, 2 years, a reason why they're cropping up more is because, and it's not for the reason you think. I will say there's a couple of sites out there that might take it a little bit too far, but at the same time, you don't have to click on them. Like you're talking about rage baiting, and you're talking about hate clicks, and and this is a conversation that's been going on for years. Please realize I am not talking about one video, because I'm not. I'm really not. I know people are going to try to sell that narrative, but I'm not. This has been something that's been a problem for years. But the problem is when you're having these conversations and you're getting this upset, is a lot of the conversation is, well, they're just doing it for the clicks and the revenue. Is like, well, one, any article on a website is for clicks. Why waste your time paying a writer to write something that nobody's going to read? So that argument in itself is really redundant. um, uh, these things are not meant to be calling out for execution style slanders. Is that to say that that doesn't exist? No, absolutely not. But it's not the ongoing problem that a lot of people are making it out to be. And the conversation is really taking away from the point. But the reason that these types of articles are popping up more, even at the risk of these companies putting their name on the line, is not because of rage clicks or revenue or whatever, because the revenue is very fleeting. These articles will trend for a couple of hours and then they die off completely. But they are important because the gaming industry is more visible than it has ever been before. Again, I've been in this industry for almost 2 decades. And when I was starting, women were not very involved, or at least they weren't very public facing. It has evolved a lot since then. We are bigger than the movie industry at this point. We are bigger than TV industry at this point. We are more profitable than both. So because of that, there's a bunch of new people scrambling to get into this industry. So what I think a lot of misconception is people are reading these articles and assuming they're meant to be slanders against men or slanders against women or whatever. And that's not the case. A lot of times these are being used as cautionary tales to younger women of like, look, if you experience this, it's not just you. Don't take it personally and don't feel like you're alone. When these people that have platforms are talking about their experience, it is more so for other women than anybody else. Also, it is also for men to that aren't privy to this type of behavior to be aware of this behavior. And again, that harkens back to what I was saying about coworkers of mine being surprised when they see all this stuff. And you shouldn't be surprised because it's not something that's not being talked about. But clearly it's not being talked about enough because people are still surprised when they see it. So these are boosts to raise awareness, not to attack, and to also be a platform, kind of like almost acting like a magnet to new women writers, especially younger women, especially women of color, that come into the space to know, like, this is something that could possibly happen. Don't take it personally and don't feel like you have to alienate yourself. The amount of times younger women, especially in their teens, will message me saying, I wanted to get into gaming, but I keep seeing the comments you get and things on your articles, and it makes me scared. And that's sad because gaming is for everyone. It's for men, it's for women, it's for non-binary, it's for whoever. I don't care if you're a freaking alien. It's for you. Gaming is for you. Gaming is awesome. It is epic and everybody should enjoy it. And it just makes me sad. And more recently, there's a journalist that wrote a piece, and a lot of it was not even necessarily just her experience, though she very much talked about her own experience. But she mentioned an experience I went through when, there was I wrote a PSA about Cyberpunk because before it launched, it did not have a seizure warning. And there was one instance in the game that was specifically designed after a device. You have the EEG machines, and then there's an aperture that comes out. And it does a sequence of lights to specifically medically designed, engineered to trigger seizure. So therefore, this is not just dangerous to people with epilepsy, but even non-epileptics are privy to seizures. You don't have to be an epileptic to have a seizure. And that was in the game. The developers I talked to were horrified. They had no idea that was, when I showed them the picture of the device itself, when I showed them video of me going into the device, because when I got out of the military, I was injured, and part of the injury resulted in me having seizures. So I went through this device many times throughout my diagnosis. And they were shocked. And we immediately got to work to keep the device in, but we slightly altered the animation, not We didn't take the animation out, but we slightly altered it to where it's not that specific pattern of flashing, so it's not dangerous. And even people that didn't have epilepsy were saying that when they did the original before the animation was changed, like we had a couple of people playing it at once at Game Informer, like they all were like, oh, that kind of gave me a headache. Like, so it was impacting people without epilepsy. That being said, so it was a PSA that was not saying Cyberpunk should take it out. It was literally saying if you are at all worried about it, or if you do have photosynthesis sensitive epilepsy and you're concerned, but you really want to play it, because this is a game, keep in mind, guys, this is a game that's been hyped for years. People were looking forward to it for years. People were already calling it game of the year before it was even released. My purpose was to be like, I had a really bad seizure because of this. So when you see this part of the game, when you see this part of the game, and this part of the game, look away. Try not to play the game when you're by yourself. Modify your screen settings to eliminate blue tones. That helps. I was sharing tips to make gaming a little bit safer. If anybody had even a shred of concern, or if they lived with somebody that had epilepsy, a lot of people our first response is, if you have epilepsy, don't play. That's stupid, because then that means I can never watch a commercial, watch a movie, watch a TV show, play a game. Can't do anything. I'm not going to sit in a closet because you don't want a slight animation change. But people have it. Like a woman reached out to me saying, I'm so glad you wrote this. My daughter has epilepsy and I've been really excited about playing this. Now I know to make sure if I do, she can't be in that room. Anyway, it got changed, but a lot of the response, and I was getting these in the hundreds, and people were like, well, you should file a police report. I did, for 2 people specifically, especially one person that went after my mom. And I haven't spoken to my mom in years. So the fact that that happened scared me, because I then had to have a conversation with her that I wasn't ready to have. And that forced me into a very uncomfortable position. And then also, she shouldn't have to be punished for my work. But a popular response to that, even though nothing I was doing was negative, was to send me gifts directly meant to cause seizures. They're, with the flashing and the whole point. And like a lot of the captions were like, enjoy this, bitch. And one person even went so far, and I did have a seizure reading one of them because I didn't catch it, because a lot of people were being sneaky about it too. One person messaged me, and this is when I closed off my DMs. One person messaged me saying, oh, I have epilepsy too. That makes me so sad that you're getting all of this hate. God, I hope you're okay. And thank you for doing what you're doing. I don't know if this helps, but I have a really cool video of my dog. Hopefully this cheers you up. I love dogs. I love puppy dogs. Like, give me all the puppy, pictures, images, videos, gifts, whatever. So I was like, oh, thanks, man. That means a lot. I appreciate it. And I clicked on it because I'm like, you shared your puppy with me. I want to see said puppers and give the puppers the attention they deserve. And it was a puppy at first, and then it transitioned into one of those triggering videos. And it's the level of malicious hate and intent behind that is terrifying. And that was another motivating factor of this person writing this article. And they reference this in their piece as well, of we're not just talking about, oh, this person said a mean thing about me, I'm sad. I mean, these are like life-threatening instances that happen. I've had to move before because of doxing. I've had to quit jobs before because it became unsafe. I've have several protection orders from the courts, which, if you know anything about getting protection orders, it's really hard to get a protection order if the person doesn't live in your state. It's very hard. And I've got several approved court orders of protection because that's how bad the evidence was. This is an issue. Does this affect every woman journalist out there? No, I am sure there are many women journalists that are like, I haven't seen that. And that is great. Let's make that a norm. Nobody should have to experience this. And I really wish that these people could express their concerns and share their experiences with the world in a way that is meant to impact in a positive way. Nobody is saying ban men from games. That's silly. And if somebody did say that, I would speak up against that too, because again, my firm philosophy is everyone deserves to game. And it just makes me really sad that every time we try to have this conversation, this is the result. In fact, a really close friend of mine actually just banned me from all social media because I retweeted a person and I was like, yo, this is not okay. Like, stop telling people what their experiences actually are. Unless you were there, you don't need to debase their experience. And they came on and was like, well, I get this and this and this as a man. I am not saying you don't experience shit. Dudes get shit on a lot, like a lot. The problem is women in not just the space, but in society in general, are still finding their legs. We weren't allowed to vote for the longest time. Like, people seem to forget that we weren't even seen as people. We couldn't even open a bank account. What was it, till 1974? I have to look at the date specifically, but I think it was the 70s. We weren't even allowed to have money, like open up our own bank account, which is why divorce rates were so much lower back then, because once you were married, you couldn't leave unless you were willing to open yourself up to the possibility of living on the streets. If you didn't have the perfect family life that would welcome you back in, you, you were trapped. And I feel like people don't take that kind of our history in account of how women have been seen throughout history, not just American history. And we're still having to assert our right to be here. And I'm sorry if your first reaction to talking about this is, well, cool, so then I can hit you. You think about hitting women a lot, because that's a weird reaction to have. Um, but yeah, if a woman hits you, knock her out. No, don't. Nobody should hit anybody. Please, that was a joke. That was a really tasteless joke. But nobody nobody should be hitting anybody. And I say this too because a very close person to me, I saw him go through hell. His girlfriend was incredibly abusive, and I saw him not be taken seriously because of that. And people belittled that. And men, you should be able to feel safe. However, our society dictates that women's safety always comes secondary. I have had bosses tell me this is why I don't hire when I bring up a safety concern, which any boss can tell you I hardly do. I am very self-reliant to the point where I've had to have people, or I've had bosses tell me, like, you don't have to do this by yourself. Let us help you. Like, I am disgustingly self-reliant because I've had to be, just with my own personal grow up story, which I'm not going to go into, but like, the few times I've brought it up, I have been told this is why we don't hire females, because it's just drama, or having any of those experiences belittled, because it's easier to discount it than to address it. And I just need people to realize that if this is not about you, back off the conversation. You know how many times I'm gonna be scrolling, doom scrolling on Twitter, on Facebook, and I will see an article. I'm like, wow, that's a shitty take. You know what I do? I don't click on it, so they don't have my click, they don't have my traffic, and I move on. Because you sharing and retweeting and making videos about these things, all you're doing is amplifying it. So if you really truly believed there was something wrong with it, you wouldn't give it the attention you're giving it. And I understand that somebody's going to split hairs and be like, well, if you're saying that, then women should shut up and not talk about this thing. They're doing it knowing the reaction they're going to get. That being said, every time an article like this goes on, for every troll that loves to harass that person, somebody else is saying, I didn't realize that was going on. I have had bosses reach out to me years later apologizing, not realizing the impact of what their response was. And that's why they do it. Going on and on about, hate clicks and the cycle, with the sole purpose of debunking what they're saying, it's harmful. And I'm not to say toxic, because I feel like the word toxic gets thrown around a lot. It's the same reason I avoid the word crunch. Is eventually a term is used so much to the point where it starts to lose its meaning a little bit, or it evolves to mean something else other than its original intent. And that's also a problem. But like, I feel like it's counterproductive. And if you're gonna talk about, no rage clicks or no hate clicks, or women are the toxic ones, it doesn't do anything. This industry is still very male dominated in terms of whose voice is worth amplifying and who's not. And to do that, all you're doing is taking this sentiment and you're making it about you. And and that's so wrong. It's so wrong. If you don't think what these people are saying is your concern, that's your prerogative. I know I'm supposed to say, well, you should care and you should advocate for change. In an ideal world, I would love for you to do that. However, you are a person on your own. I can't force you to do anything. I'm not going to belittle you. But if you're not going to help, move aside. Move aside. Because if we let ourselves be cowed and silenced all the time, we would still not be able to vote. We would still not be able to hold jobs. We would still not have a lot of the freedoms we have today. The work is not done. And the work is especially not done for minorities, for minority communities. And until the work is done, people need to keep talking about it so things can change and we can go back to business as usual of everybody just chilling out, vibing, and having a good time. Don't you guys want to have a good time? What do you have against fun? I mean, really. So that was kind of my mini rant. I am proud of the women in my industry. I try to be very careful, and anytime I talk about something like this, I made a status, I think last month, or I said, wow, some men in this industry get celebrated for doing the absolute bare minimum. Was I talking about a specific person? Yes. Was I going to tag them? No, because I don't believe in targeted harassment. Um, that being said, it's something that resonated with a lot of people because it's true. But I was very careful because I know it's a standard. There's a lot of people that status could have been about. But I don't want anybody who follows me to feel uncomfortable. If you follow me, I appreciate it. And I will always do something, I will do whatever I can to make you feel comfortable. So I try to be very careful in my verbiage to say some men. Um, because I don't, especially younger guys, 18, 19-year-old, you're still learning your place in the world. You're still learning who you are. And I don't want you to feel like, oh, she must hate me. Because I don't really hate anybody. Like you have to do a lot to make me hate you. Like a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. And so I try, but not everybody's going to do that. And they don't have to because it's obvious it's not all men. It's obvious. It's obvious. But the call to attention is for all men because if this is not the behavior you're exhibiting, you can help. And it's an invitation for you to reach out to these women and say, how can I help? That's it. So don't prove these articles right by going after them. And you know what? People are talking about, you know, it goes into this wider conversation of cancel culture. And, I'm a big firm believer, my abuser was outed not terribly long ago. And, I got accused of cancel culture, but what you guys didn't see was the 3 years constantly where I took the abuse because I felt bad for this person. And even when everything was going through the mud, I was still defending this person. I was still like, I think something out might be wrong. They're very insecure. I was still defending this person, but 3 years of constant abuse, 2 a.m. calls, hate, lies, slander, eventually your consequences are going to catch up to you. But the larger conversation is, people only taking snippets of what's being said or what's public. You guys don't know what's behind the scenes of some of these stories, and I am not alone in that as well. But if you're not going to help, at least don't hinder the messaging. And if something is being falsely accused, share that with the person. And if that doesn't work, open the conversation with this is the thing, is we're in a society where nobody's willing to be direct. Everybody, I have an issue, I'm going to immediately take to Twitter and weaponize my following. And I feel like that's wrong. I feel like we've lost our ability to communicate together. And I will always, and I'm not saying everybody has to do what I do, because I get beat up a lot over it. I'm not this, everybody tells you to ignore the trolls and stuff. And that's really good advice, but it's advice I have a hard time taking because I want to try to talk to you. A good example is earlier today, somebody was going after me hard. And instead, I could have easily gone after them harder. I could have easily have quote tweeted them and sticked my follower, even though I have a very small following, but like I could have done that, but I didn't. And we had a conversation, and the conversation ended with that person DMing me saying, thank you for talking to me. I now look back at what I was saying and I realize I was wrong. And that's going to help future interactions with that person and other people talking about this. And that's important. That's how change is affected. But not everybody has the patience to do that. And a lot of people, they don't owe you that. They don't. As much as in a perfect world, that's great. They don't owe you that. Because the thing is when you're getting this on a daily basis, you're getting threats on a daily basis, you're getting belittled on a daily basis, women really do have to work twice as hard in this industry to get about the same amount of respect. And that's no fault to my male coworkers. I love this industry has so many talented people. Like, oh my God, I can't even handle it. And it's men, it's women, it's binary, it's everything. Like, we have so many talented humans, and it's great. But like, when you get this kind of stuff on a daily basis, eventually you snap, or you get so tired where you no longer care about engaging in those meaningful conversations because you physically can't anymore. You're so exhausted and burnt out from having to explain the same point 1,000 different times, and having that point drive home only once out of every 1,000 times. Like, it's exhausting. So please, just please stop trying to dictate the narrative. Stop trying to make the narrative about you. Let them talk. Let them get their stories out. If they're speaking from their own experience, let them do that. Thank you for tuning in this video. If you're still here with me, I appreciate you very much. Thank you guys for hanging out, and hopefully this doesn't blow up in my face. I'm sure it will. But thank you guys so much, and I'll catch you guys next time.